James Carter was just an ordinary man living an ordinary life. He had grown up in a quiet Texas town, working his way through school to become a mechanical engineer. His days were simple: working in a local auto shop, spending time watching sci-fi movies, and occasionally driving out into the countryside to stargaze. He had always been fascinated by space, though he never thought he'd experience something truly otherworldly. That was, until one fateful night. It started like any other evening. James had stayed late at the shop, finishing up repairs on a client's old pickup truck. It was well past midnight when he finally locked up and got into his car. The drive home was peaceful, the roads empty and the sky clear, revealing an endless spread of stars. As he drove along the highway, he turned on the radio, switching between stations, but all he got was static. He frowned, tapping the dashboard. That's weird, he thought. His car had never had radio issues before. Shrugging, he kept driving, but then something even stranger happened. His headlights flickered. At first, it was just a small glitch, but then they dimmed and brightened in a rhythmic pattern. James slowed the car, gripping the wheel tightly. Suddenly, the entire road ahead was bathed in an eerie, bluish-white glow. "What the hell?" he muttered, his heart pounding. Before he could react, the car's engine shut off completely. The dashboard lights went dark, and the steering wheel locked. Panic surged through him as he pressed the brakes, but the car wasn't responding. He wasn't moving forward anymore. He was floating. James felt an invisible force lift him from his seat. He scrambled to grab onto something, but his hands found only empty air. A loud humming noise filled his ears, growing more intense, until everything around him blurred into white light. Then, silence. When James regained consciousness, he was lying on a metallic surface, staring up at a ceiling covered in strange glowing symbols. A cold sensation ran through his body as he realized his arms and legs were restrained. The cuffs around his wrists and ankles weren't metal, but some sort of energy field that hummed softly. He tried to struggle, but they wouldn't budge. His breath quickened. He looked around the room. Everything was smooth, sleek, and metallic, almost like something out of the sci-fi movies he loved. But this was no movie. This was real. A movement caught his attention. His blood ran cold. Standing at the far end of the room were three tall figures. They were humanoid in shape but completely alien in appearance. Their skin was grayish-blue, smooth and almost translucent. Their heads were elongated, their eyes massive and black, void of any whites or pupils. They had no visible mouths, yet James heard a voice echo in his head. "Do not struggle, human." James' muscles tensed. The voice wasn't coming from the room, it was inside his mind. Telepathy. Who are you?" he demanded, his voice shaky. The tallest of the three aliens stepped forward. "We are the Zerithians. You are under arrest for crimes against the Galactic Order." James' mind reeled. What the hell are you talking about? I haven't done anything." The alien tilted its head slightly, studying him with those deep, endless black eyes. "You represent your species. Humanity has violated intergalactic law. Your kind has tampered with forces beyond its understanding. You have sent signals into space, disturbing civilizations far older and more advanced than your own. You have polluted your world and waged war upon yourselves. You are a threat to the cosmic balance." James' pulse pounded in his ears. "That's insane. I'm just a regular guy. I fix cars for a living. How am I responsible for any of that?" "Ignorance does not absolve guilt. You are a representative of your kind, chosen at random. You will be transported to the Supreme Tribunal of Zargonia, where your species will be judged." James stared at them in disbelief. Chosen at random? He wasn't an astronaut or a scientist. He was just some guy who had a love for space. And now, somehow, he was on trial for all of humanity. "This has to be some kind of mistake," he said, shaking his head. "You can't just kidnap people and put them on trial for something they had no control over." "We do not make mistakes." James clenched his fists, frustration boiling inside him. This was insane. He needed to think. He needed a way out. But before he could say another word, the energy cuffs tightened, and a strange, tingling sensation spread through his body. His limbs went numb, and his vision blurred. The last thing he saw before everything faded to black was the cold, expressionless eyes of his captors. When he awoke again, he was no longer in the metallic room. He was in a different place altogether. The walls were dark, almost black, but pulsing with streaks of glowing blue and purple veins, like something alive. The air was unnaturally crisp, yet James didn't feel like he was breathing. It was as if oxygen wasn't even necessary here. He was inside a containment cell, floating, weightless. His restraints were gone, but the walls around him were made of some kind of transparent energy field, preventing any escape. Outside his cell, more of the Zorithians moved through the massive chamber. Dozens of other cells lined the walls, each one containing different species, creatures James had never seen before. Some were humanoid, others completely alien in form. Some looked terrified, while others seemed resigned to their fate. A sinking feeling formed in James' gut. He wasn't the only prisoner. Was this some kind of cosmic prison? How many others had the Zorithians abducted? And more importantly, how the hell was he supposed to get out of this? Panic threatened to take over, but James forced himself to breathe. He needed to think. If the aliens thought humanity was a problem, they clearly didn't understand just how dangerous humans could be when their backs were against the wall. They had made a huge mistake taking him, and James was going to make sure they regretted it. James didn't know how long he had been trapped in the floating containment cell. Time felt strange here, as if hours and minutes had no meaning. He tried counting in his head, estimating how long it had been since his abduction, but eventually he lost track. The other prisoners in nearby cells remained mostly silent, either too terrified or too resigned to speak. Occasionally, strange creatures passed by his cell, their glowing eyes scanning him with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. Some looked humanoid, others were monstrous, with appendages that defied biology as James understood it. But the most unsettling thing was the silence. There was no sound of machinery, no hum of energy, nothing. Just the weight of his own thoughts pressing down on him. Then, without warning, the field surrounding his cell vanished. James felt himself drop slightly before landing on a smooth platform. Before he could react, two Zorithian guards approached him, their slender gray forms moving with eerie precision. "It is time," one of them said telepathically. James wanted to resist, but he knew there was no point, at least, not yet. He was out of the cell, and that was progress. The guards motioned for him to follow, and with no other choice, he did. They led him through a long corridor made of dark, pulsating walls, almost like the veins of some giant living creature. Strange symbols and markings glowed faintly along the walls, shifting as if they were watching him. Finally, they entered a massive chamber. James' breath caught in his throat. The room was enormous, easily the size of a stadium, but there were no seats, only floating platforms arranged in a circle, each occupied by an alien of different species. Some were insect-like with chitinous exoskeletons, others were reptilian, covered in thick scales. There were dozens, if not hundreds of them. At the center of it all stood the Supreme Tribunal of Zargonia. The judge was unlike the other Zorithians. It was much larger, standing at least twice as tall as the others, with 6 glowing blue eyes arranged vertically on its elongated head. Its body shimmered, as though it was composed of pure energy and barely contained within its form. When it spoke, its voice wasn't just in James' head, it vibrated through the entire chamber. "Human, you stand before the Supreme Tribunal. Your species is charged with crimes against the cosmic order." James exhaled sharply. "I already told your people, I haven't done anything." The judge tilted its head slightly. "Your species has been observed for millennia. You spread chaos. You wage wars upon yourselves. You poison your own world. And now, you have begun sending signals into the cosmos, disrupting the peace of advanced civilizations." James clenched his fists. "You mean radio waves? Television broadcasts? We weren't trying to disrupt anything. We were just trying to explore. Exploration without understanding leads to destruction." The judge's 6 eyes glowed brighter. "We have seen your kind's history. You take without thought. You experiment without consideration of the consequences. The tribunal must now decide if your species should be allowed to continue. James' stomach dropped. You're talking about wiping us out. If necessary. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. James' mind raced. He was being held accountable for the entire human race, and these beings, these godlike entities, were deciding whether humanity had the right to exist. He had to think fast. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. You've been watching us for thousands of years, right? You've seen our wars, our pollution, our mistakes. But have you seen our art, our music, our ability to change? Some of the floating figures shifted, as if considering his words. James continued. Yeah, we've made mistakes. Big ones. But we're not just destroyers. We create. We innovate. We learn from our failures. If you've really been watching us, then you know we've come a long way. Slavery. We abolished it. Women's rights. We fought for them. We don't always get it right the first time, but we keep trying. Doesn't that count for something? The judge was silent for a moment, then spoke. Your argument is noted. The tribunal will deliberate. With a wave of its hand, the guards moved forward again. James tried to protest, but the judge's glowing eyes locked onto him. You will remain in custody until a final decision is made. The guards seized him and led him away. James' heart pounded. He had bought some time, but was it enough? James sat in his new containment area, which was slightly larger than his previous cell. This time, there was a raised platform to sit on, and a shimmering force field separated him from the rest of the facility. He was exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind was spinning, replaying the trial over and over. Then, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Human. James turned sharply. Standing just outside his cell was a Zerithian, but unlike the others, this one was smaller, with a more curious expression in its large black eyes. My name is Xyler, the alien said telepathically. I have been observing your words. You are unusual. James let out a dry laugh. Yeah, I get that a lot. Xyler tilted its head. Your people are reckless, yet you possess something our kind does not. Adaptability, creativity, emotion. It is intriguing. James frowned. You mean your people don't have emotions? Not as you do. We function through logic, order, and the preservation of balance. Emotion is inefficient. James shook his head. That's why you don't understand us. Humans aren't just logical. We're passionate. We take risks. And sometimes we screw up. But it's also what makes us great. Xyler studied him for a long moment. Then, to James' surprise, the alien nodded. Perhaps we were wrong about your species. James' pulse quickened. This was his chance. Then help me. Help me prove that humanity deserves to exist. Xyler hesitated. Interfering in tribunal matters is forbidden. James leaned forward. And what if your people are making a mistake? What if wiping us out means losing something the universe actually needs? The alien seemed to consider this. Finally, it spoke. I will think on your words, human. But be warned, the tribunal does not change its mind easily. With that, Xyler turned and walked away, leaving James alone once more. But this time, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he had planted the seed of doubt in the minds of his captors. And if he could convince one of them, he could convince more. James Carter had never considered himself an extraordinary person. He was no scientist, no soldier, no great thinker, just a man who fixed cars and loved looking at the stars. Yet here he was, imprisoned on an alien planet, standing trial for the fate of the entire human race. The irony would have been amusing if it wasn't so terrifying. Days passed in his confinement, though he had no way of measuring time. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed in a slow, rhythmic pattern, creating an eerie atmosphere. Food was delivered in the form of gelatinous cubes that provided nutrients but had no taste. There were no sounds, no conversations, just silence and the weight of the unknown. But then, something changed. Xyler returned. The young Zorithian stood outside his cell, its black eyes unblinking. James sat up immediately. "Back to check on your favorite prisoner," he quipped. "I have been studying your people," Xyler responded, ignoring his sarcasm. "The tribunal considers humans reckless and destructive. Yet, I am beginning to wonder if that is the full truth." James crossed his arms. "Oh, and what did you find?" Xyler hesitated. "Your history is filled with war, violence, and environmental destruction. But it is also filled with progress. Your kind has an unusual ability to adapt, to survive under extreme circumstances, to change when necessary. That is not something my people possess." James smirked. "So what you're saying is, you guys are stuck in your ways? We have maintained order for thousands of years. We do not take unnecessary risks." "That's the problem," James said, leaning forward. "You don't take risks. You don't innovate. You just exist. That's why humans are different. We screw up a lot, but we also learn. We push boundaries. Without risk, there's no progress." Xyler seemed to process this for a long moment before speaking again. "Your species does not fear chaos the way we do." James shrugged. "We don't like it, but we embrace it. Chaos is where creativity comes from. Music, art, technology, it all starts as an idea, a risk. You think we're dangerous because we don't follow a strict order like you, but that's exactly why we've made so much progress in such a short time." The alien studied him. "This is why I believe the tribunal may be wrong. Perhaps humanity is not a threat, but a necessary force in the universe." James' heart pounded. He had been waiting for this moment. "Then help me, Xyler. Help me prove that humanity deserves to exist." Xyler hesitated again, glancing around as if making sure no one else was listening. Finally, it spoke. "The tribunal has already begun final deliberations. They are leaning toward the eradication of your species." James' stomach turned. "Then we don't have much time." "No, we do not." For the first time since his abduction, James saw something almost human in Xyler's expression. Uncertainty, maybe even doubt. "I am going to make a risky decision, human." James raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying you're about to take your first human-like risk?" Xyler didn't answer, but the faintest hint of something close to amusement flickered in its large black eyes. Then, the force field around James' cell flickered and vanished. James didn't hesitate. He stood up. "All right, what's the plan?" Xyler gestured for him to follow. "There is a way off Zargonia, but it will not be easy. If we are caught, we will both be executed." James smirked. "Now you're thinking like a human." Moving through the alien facility felt surreal. The halls were massive, lined with glowing blue conduits that pulsed like veins in a living organism. The other prisoners remained locked in their cells, unaware that anything was happening. James wanted to help them, but there was no time. As they approached a central control hub, Xyler stopped. "We must deactivate the planetary defense grid. Without it, no ship can leave the atmosphere." James scratched his head. "And I'm guessing they don't just have an off switch?" "It requires biometric authorization. I can grant you access, but it will trigger alarms." James exhaled sharply. "Well, no turning back now." Xyler placed a hand against a control panel, and the glowing veins of the facility pulsed brighter. A deep hum filled the air, followed by a robotic voice speaking in the Zorithian language. Suddenly, red warning lights flared to life. The alarm had been triggered. "Move!" Xyler commanded. James sprinted after the alien as automated defense drones emerged from the walls. They fired streams of glowing energy, barely missing as he dove behind a metallic pillar. Xyler raised a hand, and with a flick of its fingers, the drones froze in place. "Go. I cannot hold them for long." James ran. The corridors blurred past him as he navigated the unfamiliar architecture, trusting Zyler's directions. Finally, they reached a docking bay. Sleek, elongated ships hovered in midair, secured by glowing restraints. Zyler manipulated the controls, releasing one of the ships. "Get inside." James didn't need to be told twice. He climbed aboard, settling into what looked like a pilot's seat. The controls were unlike anything he had ever seen, but to his surprise, the interface adjusted to his touch, shifting into symbols he could almost understand. Zyler leaped inside, sealing the hatch behind them. More alarms blared. The Zorithians had discovered their escape. "Time to go," James shouted. Zyler activated the ship's thrusters, and with a jolt, they shot out of the docking bay, racing toward the upper atmosphere. The sky above was a deep violet, stars stretching into the distance. Then, the planetary defense grid activated. Energy beams crisscrossed the sky, locking onto their ship. Zyler's hands moved swiftly over the controls. "I am diverting all power to the warp drive." "Hold on." James gripped the seat. "Oh, I'm holding on all right." The ship trembled as the energy grid closed in. Then, with a deafening pulse, they shot forward at impossible speed, the stars stretching into infinite streaks of light. They were free. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the ship was the only sound. Finally, Zyler turned to James. "We did it." James let out a breathless laugh. "Yeah, we did." Zyler studied him for a moment. "I will take you back to Earth. But I must warn you, this is not over. The tribunal will not forget what we have done." James nodded. "Good. Because I don't think humanity will forget them either." The Zorithians had made their biggest mistake by arresting a human. And now, the universe was about to find out why. The stolen Zorithian ship emerged from hyperspace near Earth's orbit, its sleek, alien design contrasting against the familiar sight of James Carter's home planet. He exhaled deeply, relief washing over him as he saw the blue and green sphere floating in the vastness of space. "We made it," he murmured. Zyler, his unexpected ally, studied Earth through the ship's transparent interface. "Yes, but I fear this is only the beginning." James frowned. "What do you mean?" "The tribunal will not let this go unchallenged. They do not act in haste, but they do not forget either. Your escape was an act of defiance. They will see it as a threat." James leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples. "So what? They'll come after me? Or are we talking about something bigger?" Zyler's black eyes locked onto his. "The tribunal does not punish individuals. They punish entire species." The words sent a chill through James' body. The realization hit him hard. Humanity wasn't just on trial anymore. They were now officially an enemy of the Zorithians. "We have to warn them," James said. "The world needs to know what's coming." "And what will you tell them?" Zyler asked. "That an advanced alien civilization is debating whether to wipe your species out? That you were captured, judged, and sentenced without Earth even knowing." James swallowed. "Yeah, that's exactly what I'll tell them." Zyler considered him for a moment before nodding. "Then let us proceed." The ship's controls shifted, responding to Zyler's mental commands. It began descending toward Earth's surface, bypassing satellites and surveillance systems with ease. They needed to land somewhere remote, somewhere James could make contact without immediate interference. As they entered the atmosphere, the ship's hull glowed red-hot, cutting through the clouds like a meteor. Finally, they touched down in a dense forest outside a small town in the United States. James unbuckled himself, adrenaline surging. "All right, let's do this." Before he could step out, Zyler placed a hand on his shoulder. "Be careful, human. Your kind is unpredictable. They may not believe you." James gave a wry smile. "Oh, they'll believe me. The real question is, what will they do about it?" The world reacts. James wasn't naive. He knew walking into a government building and telling them, "Hey, aliens abducted me, put humanity on trial, and now they might come back to destroy us," wouldn't go over well. He needed proof. Thankfully, Xyler had anticipated this. Using the ship's advanced technology, they created a detailed holographic recording of the tribunal's judgment, showing the Xerithians debating humanity's fate. Every word spoken, every image of the massive intergalactic courtroom, was captured in crystal-clear resolution. Armed with this, James contacted the media. At first, no one took him seriously. Reports of a man claiming aliens put Earth on trial were dismissed as the ramblings of a lunatic. But when the video evidence was released, everything changed. Governments scrambled. Scientists were in disbelief. World leaders held emergency meetings. For the first time in history, humanity was united, not against each other, but against an existential threat from beyond the stars. The United Nations convened a special session, with James and Xyler invited as the first-ever envoys of an alien encounter. Xyler, despite its initial reluctance, explained the Xerithian perspective. Your kind's ability to adapt is both your greatest strength and your greatest danger. The tribunal sees you as a variable that cannot be controlled. That is why they fear you. But fear isn't justification for destruction, James argued. If they really wanted peace, they'd work with us, not against us. The discussion sparked fierce debate among world leaders. Some advocated for immediate preparation, calling for the development of planetary defenses. Others believed diplomacy was the answer, urging for an attempt at peaceful negotiations with the tribunal. One thing was certain: humanity could no longer ignore the greater cosmos. The Xerithians' return. Months passed. Tensions remained high, but there was no sign of the tribunal. Some believed the Xerithians had abandoned their decision to exterminate Earth. Others, including James, knew better. Then, it happened. A massive rupture in space appeared near Earth, a gateway of swirling energy that pulsed with otherworldly power. From it emerged an armada of Xerithian ships, their sleek, silver forms hovering ominously above the planet. Panic erupted. Cities went into lockdown. Military forces mobilized, but everyone knew Earth's weapons were primitive compared to what the Xerithians possessed. A single message was transmitted across all frequencies, spoken in every language on Earth simultaneously. The tribunal has returned to deliver its final judgment. James stood in a UN control room, watching as the ships loomed over major cities. Xyler stood beside him. "They're giving us one last chance," James muttered. Xyler nodded. "Perhaps. Or perhaps they have already decided." James took a deep breath. "Then let's make our case." The final decision. A meeting was arranged between Earth's leaders and the Xerithian tribunal, with James and Xyler serving as mediators. The gathering took place aboard the tribunal's massive mothership, a structure that dwarfed anything built by human hands. James stood before the same supreme tribunal that had once sentenced humanity. He refused to show fear. "You've seen what we've done since my escape," he said. "The world didn't fall into chaos. We didn't turn on each other. We united. We adapted. That's what we do." The judge's glowing eyes studied him. "You have proven resilience." "Not just resilience," James corrected. "Potential. You called us reckless. Maybe we are. But that's why we grow. That's why we survive. And that's why you shouldn't destroy us." The tribunal was silent for a long time. Then the judge spoke. "The tribunal has reconsidered. Humanity will not be destroyed." James felt a wave of relief wash over him. "However," the judge continued, "you will be watched closely. Should your kind become the threat we foresee, there will be no further warnings." James nodded. "Fair enough." The tribunal vanished into their swirling portal, their ships retreating one by one. Humanity had won, not through war, not through surrender, but through proving that they were worth the risk. A new future. As James stood beneath Earth's night sky, staring at the stars, he knew everything had changed. The universe was no longer a mystery. Humanity was no longer alone. And while they had survived this trial, a new challenge awaited, proving they were worthy of their place among the stars. Xyler approached him. "What will you do now?" James smiled. Same thing humans have always done. Keep moving forward. And with that, the human race took its first step into a much larger universe.